What's going on, y'all? So in this video, I'm going to be comparing the PreSonus Fat Channel XT EQs to third-party plugins. So I've already done a video where I've compared the compressors to third-party plugins. So this is my follow-up to that video to where we're doing the EQs. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll have a link in the description, and it'll also be a link at the end of this video to see the video I did on the compressors. So with the Fat Channel XT EQs, we've got 10 EQs here. We're going to be looking at 7 of them. We're going to be looking at the passive EQ, vintage EQ, Alpine, Baxandall, Solar, Tube EQ, which is the mid-range from the Pultec, and the vintage 3-band. So we're going to start with the passive EQ, which is a Pultec style EQ. And on this, I've boosted 5 at 10K and I boosted 1 at 100 hertz. And just so we can remember what this sounds like with no processing, let's bypass that and make sure everything's bypassed. And let's just play this vocal.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So we've been comparing them to just one other EQ, but I've got the Waves Puig Tech and I've got the Softube Tech. So we'll compare this to both of them. And we'll start with the Tube Tech. Well, first we'll start with the Fat Channel, and then we'll do the Pultec. We'll do the Tube Tech from Softube. So this is the passive EQ.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And here's the Softube.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Waves Puig Tech.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So between these, I hear more low end on the Fat Channel. The Softube has more high end to me. It sounds smooth and airy. And the Puig Tech from Waves kind of has a balance of both to me. I hear the low end and I hear more high end. So it's going to be interesting to continue and go through these just because I feel like it's easier to model EQ curves versus compression characteristics. But I heard a difference between all 3 of these here. Let's move on to the next EQ. So this is the vintage EQ from the Fat Channel, which is a 1073 style EQ, and from Waves we have the Sheps 73, which is one of my favorite 1073 style EQs. So we'll start with the Fat Channel.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Sheps 73.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So with the Shep 73, I heard just a hair more high end. Other than that, these sound similar to me. I forgot to mention what I was doing. So with this, I boosted 2 dB at 220 hertz and 3 dB on the high shelf at 12K. I'm surprised that these sounded as similar as they did because I felt like when I've always used the vintage EQ, the EQ moves felt subtle on there when I would boost and cut. Whereas on the Ship 73, I always felt like I can do a dB or 2 dB and I could really hear the difference on there. All right, let's move on to the next EQ. So here we've got the Alpine EQ, 550 EQ in the fat channel, which is obviously a 550A from API. And we'll start with the fat channel. Oh, I'm doing 2 dB at 200 hertz and 12.5K, adding 6 dB at 12.5K on a high shelf.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Waves API 550A.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So for these two, I prefer the Alpine 550 EQ on the fat channel. I don't know, it was something I was not liking about the Waves 550A here. It took away a little of the clarity to me, and maybe it was a little dark was the reason for that. But just out of these two, I just preferred the 550 EQ, the 550 Alpine EQ. It sounded smoother and had more clarity, in my opinion. So this is the Baxandall EQ, and I've got the Bax EQ from Plug-in Alliance here. I am cutting at 54 hertz, boosting a dB and a half at 230 hertz, boosting 3 dB on a 7.1K shelf, and on the high end, I'm cutting at 28K. Okay, let's start with the Baxandall EQ on the fat channel.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Dangerous Bax EQ from Plug-in Alliance.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So these two sound really similar to me. I feel like the Dangerous Bax EQ is just a hair smoother, but I would say I probably wouldn't be able to pick these two out of a blind shootout. They sound that close to me. All right, let's move on to the next EQ. So here we have the Solar 69 EQ in the fat channel, which is based off the Helios Type 69 EQ. And from Waves, we have the HLS. Found interesting between these two is that in the bass frequencies, they have different frequencies. So because they didn't have the frequency I wanted, I wouldn't be able to match them, so I just did the mid-range and high end here. So I boosted 2 dB at 1K and I boosted 4 dB at 10K on the high end. So let's start with the Solar 69 EQ on the fat channel.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
and the Waves HLS.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So between these two, they both sound very similar to me. I don't think I'd be able to pick these out in a blind shootout either. Let's move on to the next EQ. Here we have the tube EQ on the Fat channel, which is the mid-range from the Pultec. We have the Softube Tube Tech Pultec back up, and we're going to be using the mid-range one, which is the bottom one here. And I am doing something a little different this time. I'm cutting 200 hertz in the low mids, and then we're boosting it. We're boosting 3K on the high end. So let's start with the Fat channel.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Softube Tube Tech.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So this one was night and day to me. I prefer the tube EQ on this one. The Tube Tech just had a lot less clarity in it, and I think the reason is that even though these are both modeling the same type of gear, the same settings aren't going to match, especially on a Pultec, because you never know how much gain you're really doing on a Pultec. But I think that where I have the 2 set on the mid frequency on the Tube Tech is pulling out more low mids than what the same setting at 2 is on the Tube EQ. So with these set the same, I prefer the Tube EQ. It still has more clarity to me, where I feel like the Tube Tech was just sucking out too much of the low mids. All right, let's move on to the last EQ. So lastly, we have the vintage 3-band, which is a 3-band EQ on the Fat channel. I'm not sure what this is modeling, but I'm comparing it to the Softube passive EQ, which is also a 3-band EQ. So what I'm doing is on the vintage 3-band, I'm boosting 2 dB at 1.6K, and on the Softube passive EQ, I'm boosting 2 dB at 1.4K. So let me just double check that. Okay, so yeah, 2 dB on the vintage 3-band and 2 dB on the passive EQ. On the high end, we're going to go a little extreme here and boost 6 dB at 10K on the passive EQ and 6 dB at 10K on the vintage 3-band. All right, let's start with the vintage 3-band.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
And the Softube passive equalizer.
There's nothing like you and I, baby, baby. This is no ordinary love, no ordinary love.
So with both of these set to 6 dB on a 10K shelf, the Softube clearly has more high end. I'm hearing a lot more high end, and it's more bright and airy. The vintage 3-band EQ, I definitely need to boost some more to get that same high end out of it. So with both of these set to 6 dB boosting at 10K shelf on the high end, the Softube clearly has more high end here when compared to the vintage 3-band. So there's a look at the EQs in the Fat Channel XT compared to third-party plugins. This was a interesting shootout to me to hear how the PreSonus EQs just sound versus third-party, because Softube and Waves has some of the best modeling in my opinion. But let me know what you thought of this shootout. Any questions, comments, let me know. I'll catch y'all next time. I want to invite everyone to check out my new podcast, the Faders Up Podcast. It's a podcast about pro audio. I've got me and 3 other Nashville professionals. We're discussing pro audio topics, pro audio lifestyle. And it's available on Apple Podcasts and it's available on Spotify. So check it out, rate it, let me know what you think.